Many footprints have been left in the Florida sands by people who actually lived here. There are others made by people who, as far as we know, have never set foot on Florida soil. Among these people was the great American troubadour, Stephen Foster. Stephen Collins Foster is generally considered to be one of the greatest American composers of heartwarming, nostalgic, and best-loved melodies. Some think he is the best American composer of the 19th century. Stephen Foster's songs have probably been played and sung more often than any other songs ever written. He was inspired to write about the things that were dear to his heart: the love of home and family, plantation life, life on the great Ohio and Mississippi rivers, and political campaigns. Stephen grew up in a large family whose interest in music, art, and literature had a great influence on his life. His older sisters played the piano and the guitar, and the family spent many happy evenings singing together around the piano. With their encouragement, Stephen learned to sing and compose and play several instruments. There was a large spring house on the Foster property, and young Stephen and his brother Morrison used to watch as drivers of the westward-bound Conestoga wagons stopped and watered their teams. The jingling of the horses' bells was to appear later in the rhythm of "O Susanna." As a boy, Stephen's nature was kind, sympathetic, unassuming, and impractical. These qualities stayed with him all through his life and contributed to his misfortunes as well as to his successes. He attended several private schools, and from 1840 to 1841, he was a student at 2 academies. But he was never very happy in school. He preferred to study only those subjects which interested him, and he disliked discipline and routine. Early in 1846, he went to work for his brother in the office of a shipping firm on the docks of the growing young city of Cincinnati. Stephen became an eyewitness to the colorful life of the steamboat era. In 1848, he burst into popularity with publication of "O Susanna," a lilting tune with wide appeal. It became almost a theme song of the gold seekers whose Conestoga wagons rolled westward to California in 1849. I come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee. I'm going to Louisiana, my true love for to see. It rained all night the day I left, the weather it was dry. The sun so hot I froze to death, Susanna, don't you cry. Oh, Susanna, oh, don't you cry for me. I've come from Alabama with my banjo on my knee. In 1850, Stephen left Cincinnati and returned to Pittsburgh, where he settled down to devote his life to writing music. He paid a romantic courtship to Jane McDowell, the daughter of old family friends. They were married, and a year later, their daughter and only child, Marion, was born. These were the happiest and most productive years of his life. His most famous song, "Old Folks at Home," was composed during this time. His popularity increased with the publication of "My Old Kentucky Home." This plantation melody reflects the poetic and sentimental feeling Stephen gave to his music, especially when it dealt with the longing for home. As a child, he had made a trip on a riverboat to Cincinnati and Kentucky, and it is known that Stephen occasionally visited his father's cousin, Judge John Rowan, builder and owner of Federal Hill, a beautiful old homestead near Bardstown, Kentucky. Perhaps part of his inspiration for this melody was derived from these visits. This work has been adopted as the official state song of Kentucky. Weep no more, my lady, oh, weep no more today. We will sing one song for the old Kentucky home, for the old Kentucky home far away. During these years, the favorite entertainment in America was the minstrel show, and the most popular of these was Christy's Minstrels. Christy was the first to sing many of Stephen Foster's songs, and he helped to make them popular throughout the country. One of these, the Glendy Burke, is named for a famous steamboat, and it reflects the life along the great Ohio and Mississippi waterways. The Glendy Burke is a mighty fast boat with a mighty fast captain, too. He sits up there on the hurricane roof and he keeps his eye on the crew. I can't stay here for they work too hard. I'm bound to leave this town. I'll take my duds and tote 'em on my back when the Glendy Burke comes down. Oh, for Louisiana, I'm bound to leave this town. Stephen made some profit from the publication of his songs, although he never became rich. Unfortunately, he often spent more than he earned. His financial problems increased, and his personal life suffered. Seeking a better situation, he took his family to live in New York. Not long after, his wife and daughter returned to Pittsburgh. Stephen expresses his longing for his wife in this famous song written in 1854. I dream of Jeannie with a light brown hair, born like a vapor on the summer air. I see her tripping with a... If Stephen had lived today, his work would have been protected by international copyright. But in those days, it did not exist, and people around the world sang Stephen's songs without paying him any money. The only money he received was from the sale of his songs published in this country, and from the small amount given him by Christy for being the first to sing his songs. He never received a penny from the use or sale of his songs in foreign countries. Depressed because he was making very little money from his music, Stephen returned to Pittsburgh. Not long after, he was forced to sell all his future interests in his works already published. Once again, he went to New York in hopes that his old spark would return. But loneliness and despair destroyed all his attempts at work. He died penniless in a hospital there in 1864 from an injury received in a fall. He was only 37 years old. His wife and brother went to New York to bring his body home. They buried him near his father and mother in the Allegheny Cemetery in Lawrenceville. His last song, Beautiful Dreamer, was published after his death. It restored the happiness and gaiety of his earlier works. Beautiful dreamer, wake unto me. Starlight and dewdrops are waiting for thee. Sounds of the rude world heard in the day, lulled by the moonlight, have all passed away. Beautiful dreamer, queen of my song, list while I woo thee with soft melody. Gone are the cares of life's busy throng. Beautiful dreamer, awake unto me. Beautiful dreamer, awake unto me. Foster composed more than 200 songs. He is more honored today than at any time during his life, with memorials built to him in several states. In his honor, a stamp was issued by our United States government. The Stephen Foster $50, coined at 3 U.S. mints, was sponsored by the Cincinnati Musical Center Association. The Stephen Collins Foster Memorial on the University of Pittsburgh campus has a fine library of Foster's letters and works. The piano which he used when composing many of his songs is there. The first large collection of material about Foster was made by a man who loved Foster's songs, Mr. Josiah Lilly, who lived in Indiana. Mr. Lilly gave his Foster Hall collection to the University of Pittsburgh. Foster's granddaughter and niece have contributed to the collection. In 1940, Foster became the first composer elected to the Hall of Fame at New York University. A bronze bust was placed there, and later another bust of him was placed in the Library of Congress. My old Kentucky home in Bardstown, Kentucky, where Foster's cousin lived, is now a memorial to Stephen. The date of his death, January 13th, has been proclaimed by congressional resolution as National Stephen Foster Day. In 1953, the Florida legislature designated January 13th to 19th as Stephen Foster Memorial Week each year. Earlier, Florida honored Foster by selecting his most famous work, Old Folks at Home, better known as Swanee River, as the state song. The first draft of this song had the Petey River. Although Foster had never seen the Swanee, he chose the name for its musical sound. He and his brother selected it from a map. The Swanee rises in the Okefenokee Swamp and flows over 200 miles through Georgia and Florida into the Gulf of Mexico. The first monument placed on the Swanee was a granite shaft erected in 1928 at Fargo, Georgia. For many years, Boy Scouts of the area led annual pilgrimages to the shrine on Foster's birthday, the 4th of July. Here on the banks of the Swanee at White Springs, Florida, a beautiful memorial has been built by the state. This Foster Museum houses copies of some of Stephen Foster's songs and animated dioramas of many of them. There are valuable antiques, such as this desk upon which Foster wrote the lyrics, Way Down Upon the Swanee River, and the piano upon which Foster played many of his compositions. This instrument was given to the museum by Foster's granddaughter. Lovely paintings grace the wings of the museum, and many musical instruments of Foster's era are on display. There's also this bell tower with 97 tubular bells which ring out across the memorial grounds with Stephen Foster's melodies. Many special events are held at White Springs, such as the Genie auditions, co-sponsored by the Florida Federation of Music Clubs and the Foster Memorial. Foster left no worldly goods, but he left a heritage of song that has outlived time and space. He has been called the true voice of America by people throughout the world. Way down upon the Swanee River, far, far away, there's where my heart is turning ever, there's where the old folks stay. All up and listening to Foster's timeless melodies in the beautiful setting of Florida's Memorial Park, it is not difficult to imagine his musical footprints leading from the banks of the Swanee to nations all around the world.